So welcome to this edition of the Secret Squirrels. Today we have a couple of special announcements. I mean, one in particular, we got some information. Maybe this information on the Manafort case is coming out. But other than that, welcome to the Secret Squirrels. We are in association with Dr. Jerome Corsi, and we are the people behind the scenes that make his Corsi Nation website tick. And we're trying to do all sorts of secret spy stuff just to, because it's fun. So hey, let's have everybody introduce each other here. Introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Abigail, and I'm happy to be a secret squirrel. And I do what I can around here and mostly learn.
Arrow.
Okay. Oh.
Uh-oh, you're cutting out. Bad bandwidth. It happens. Technical difficulties. Okay, we're going to have to come back to you. How about CD? CD, you there?
Love the music, by the way. It's very secret-y.
Okay, gold standard.
Well, as you can see, we're so secret that lots of our members are still being secret. You can't even hear them.
Don't even know we're here.
I'm Gold Standard, and I work on Corsi Nation to get the learning and education section of the website up and running. So stay tuned to that part for your post.
I go by Dr. CD Camp. Had my mic muted a minute ago when I tried to introduce myself. And I do a lot of the volunteer vetting and other things to help Dr. Corsi organize things and get the right people headed in the right direction, do the right things.
Okay. Jax, you're up.
I'm Jax. I don't do much. I just kind of hang out and cause trouble.
We're going to have to break her of that habit. It's almost like she needs to be, it's like she needs to be housebroken herself.
It's not true. She does everything.
Yeah. So Jax is our resident webmaster, among other things. He does many things, but the webmaster is the one that we rely on the most. Right, troublemaker? Okay. JR.
I guess.
Hello, I'm JR. I'm a Georgia Peach, and I'm glad to be here.
What's happening in Georgia these days? Anything interesting?
It's just hot and muggy. I'm looking forward to fall.
It's kind of the same thing here, too, I guess. A lot of rain recently.
Yep.
It's rain all over the place. So, hey, CD, you got any news for us?
Yeah, what's interesting is the deep state has coordinated to ensure that verdicts were coming out on all three significant trials on the same day. The Manafort trial right now is unfolding. Imwan Iran earlier today was basically let go because that's what we do with the ones who are taking down our Constitution and our government and giving away all our secrets and doing all the really black hat things in the background, while the folks that don't do nearly as much as the Awans do are the ones that end up in trial fighting for their lives. So Awan is taking a walk, and Michael Cohen has pleaded guilty to one charge, which is probably a plea deal. The chances are, with them trying to get Cohen to roll over on Trump, he at least came to some ground that they liked, and he has now been just found guilty of one. Right now, the jury in the Manafort case has given their findings to the judge. There were 18 charges, 18 counts, and on those 18 counts, the jury was deadlocked on 10, meaning that there is going to be no finding as guilty or not guilty on those 10 counts. They are, in essence, what you would consider under normal circumstances, in essence, a mistrial for those charges. Of course, the prosecution can bring those charges up again if they choose to retry on those 10. But as of this moment, we're down to 8 then. Out of those 8 findings, at least 5 are guilty verdicts, arriving at conclusions that Manafort did participate in bank fraud, tax evasion, and it's unclear how that falls, whether that's 2 counts of this and 3 counts of that. But the total is, at this point, from what's being reported as the runners, as they call them, come flying out of the courthouse to report up to their anchors, the news crew anchors, who that then report it to the public. The magic number was 5 guilty. They all of the news crews seemed extremely jubilant that the guilty verdicts were being reached. You could hear, if you were watching the George Webb live stream that he's doing right outside the courthouse, you could hear them, the news crews and their runners, as they were coming by, cheerfully presenting the good news that Manafort has been found guilty of at least 5 things. A few minutes ago, the Manafort family left the courthouse, walked through the throng of reporters. Their eyes were all cast down in a somber mood, no comments from any of them, Paul Manafort's wife among them. They walked through the assembly of court reporters and continued on down the street. So that's pretty much all we know at this point. There will be a statement made. 9 times out of 10, the prosecution is going to come out and gloat about how they really nailed this bad boy to the wall, and what they're going to do with the other charges that ended up in deadlocks. And then there'll be the defense side that will make comments. Now, there is one wrinkle in this, according to George Webb, and that is that this is a point in the process where, even though there have been 5 guilty verdicts, that there could be a huddle, and maybe that's what's going on right now, with the judge leading the huddle and talking to both the prosecution and defense side and coming to some way to wrap it up and to see if there's some way to do it in a way that puts it into a package and avoids having to go to sentencing with things needing to be sorted out then. So there's still a lot to be answered, but at this point, 5 guilty verdicts in the Manafort trial.
So it looks like here I got a Chicago Trib article just published about 8 minutes ago, or I guess, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, they're definitely, as predicted, they're using this as some kind of indictment of Trump. So I'll read this paragraph. The verdict was part of a stunning 1-2 punch of bad news for the White House, coming as the president's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, was pleading guilty in New York as a part of a separate deal with prosecutors. The jury turned the decision after deliberating 4 days on the charges of tax evasion and bank fraud against the former Trump campaign chairman. So right there, we can see how they're trying to paint this picture, because the charges here have nothing to do with Trump, but they want to tie it to Trump because we're just trying to have guilty by association. And this is supposed to be some kind of evidence that when he was acting as the campaign chairman, that he was colluding with the Russians. But that is not what is on trial here. That is not the thing that he is found guilty of. And I mean, that's the part that truth seekers need to watch for, is the way that they're trying to use this to somehow damage Trump and the MAGA movement. So anybody got any comments on this?
Right, and the way these things work out is that when you fall short of of finding somebody guilty or whatever the goal is, you then take whatever crumbs you can assemble and try to turn those into a cake. So they are assembling these cake crumbs laying on the ground and trying to turn it into a finding that's against Trump, when Brainstorm is 100% right. There's nothing that is going on in the Manafort trial or some of these other issues that have anything to do with Donald Trump. The tax issues that Manafort was charged with took place in 2005, were already reviewed by Rod Rosenstein, who was the person to look at them at that point in time. Exactly. And he found no reason to go forward and to file charges at that time. They're only being brought up now in order to try to put pressure on Manafort to make a deal, which he obviously refused to do. And now he's paying the consequences for it. But one way or another, the press is going to have their pound of flesh.
So why is it that
he was railroaded?
Why would Trump pardon him? I mean,
it's going to be this is a difficult decision for President Trump to make, because if he does pardon Manafort, he will be fueling the mob,
right,
press with their pitchforks and tar buckets will storm the White House, saying he's letting this guilty guy go free.
Well, if he did pardon him, why would he though? I mean, if he did pardon him, it would be favoritism, right? Wouldn't he be playing favoritism?
At this point, I think President Trump will stand pat on the finding of the jury, and Paul Manafort is not one thing to keep in mind through this whole process. Paul Manafort is not an angel.
Mm-hmm.
He was over in Europe at the time when the Soviet Union collapsed, and when the pieces were falling and the oligarchs were starting to take over in the power gap that was formed when the communist regime went away. Then immediately these people that are now called the oligarchs, these are the billionaire George Soros types that are operating all of the Russian oil companies and so on. There were opportunities for people that had contacts already over in Russia to start making deals, seeing what was going on, and try then to benefit from it. Paul Manafort was part of that process.
Well, it seems like people that are playing the game at this level all have skeletons in the closet, right? I mean, it isn't like you can't even get to that level of the game without doing something dirty.
Oh, exactly, because it's not only Manafort, but we've got Mueller, we've got Rosenstein, Comey. I mean, the list goes on, and yet it's only some of these people are, because of their political affiliations, are the ones that are being chosen to be the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah, but see, why is this? Why is this the case that in order to get to that level of playing in the game, you have to have something dirty? It's because the deep state doesn't let you into those positions of power unless they have some capacity to have blackmail. If they don't have anything to blackmail you with, then they don't even let you have the position. So
it's power and control. That's how they
right. So and then they have the honeypot operations where they film you doing bad stuff, and then hold that over your head when you're make sure that you vote the right way or whatever. So I'm definitely very curious about how the president will address this situation, and I'm looking forward to the rally that he's got playing tonight. That he's having tonight. He announced he had a tweet here. It says, "Join me tonight at the Charleston Civic Center in West Virginia at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Tickets, blah blah blah." But yeah, we're gonna definitely have to watch that one, see how he responds to all this drama. Another thing I wanted to mention before we get to our main news story is Seth Rich's story about the former DNC head denies the report that she was at the hospital the night of Seth Rich murder. Who is Donna Brazile? Anybody have any backstory on Donna Brazile?
Donna Brazile was a key player in the Clinton White House. She has always been directly connected to both Bill and Hillary. And she then, during the campaign period in 2016, became associated with CNN. And she's the one that was feeding Hillary the questions before the debates.
And she came out with a book about that, right? She exposed all of that.
She plays, I think, both sides of the table based on how her image goes, and tries to, like Loretta Lynch at times, when she laments that she allowed that tarmac meeting to go ahead, but she was perfectly willing to become appointed the next Supreme Court justice as long as the wind blew the right direction. These two people both go with the wind.
So she's just out for herself, and she doesn't really care which side she ends up on.
My opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she's ideologically driven. She's just, they wanted to rebrand the Democratic Party, I think, with her book, and trying to say, yeah, we're the good guys, and we got some bad people out, but yeah, we exposed them, and here's your friendly new face of the Democratic Party. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. That's Donna Brazile.
So we got Laura Loomer's tweet here that says, according to Real Matt Couch, Donna Brazile and Muriel Browser were both at the hospital at the same time Seth Rich, the night he died. How did they know he was there, and why were they there around 4 a.m.? This is also strange. And that's another thing. I mean, we don't really think too much about, I mean, the Seth Rich murder, as they paint the picture that he was mugged or whatever. But he didn't die at the scene. He was at the hospital for a couple hours, so maybe he was conscious during some of that time, and who knows what he might have said, and who was there to hear it, you know. So,
of course, we should be prepared to recognize that those accounts of Donna Brazile and the other guy being at the hospital have already been denied. So we just need to persist and see what really is true.
Right, and one of the key things, still keep the door open for that supposed witness who had come forward a while back, and it's acted as if he had firsthand information about what had happened.
Luke.
Dr. Corsi had acted as if he was going to follow up and to find out if it was legit, and we'll have to put that on an agenda to kind of find out if that's still in the works or Luke has gone into the wind.
Isn't it fun, all this drama that we have to deal with? It's like a real-life soap opera. Only problem is that
why is drama only associated with the left? That's what I want to know. I'm kind of getting
They're
tired
drama
of it all
queens.
coming from their side. I guess it's frustrating. When are we going to get a break?
Well,
so
I think for personal mental health reasons, sometimes it's easier just to treat it like it's a soap opera, but it does have serious implications, unfortunately. We're playing a game that we don't really want to play, and we have to find the fun in it, otherwise we'll end up very depressed.
Oh, yeah. Which is what they want anyway.
Yeah, so...
The thing to keep in mind is that the Lord is in charge, and no matter how this goes, whether meant it for ill or good, he always turns it to good.
Arizona Ames in chat wants to let us know, don't forget the Debbie Wasserman Schultz connection with MS-13 as her henchman.
Right. Well, yeah, as far as I know, that's unverified rumor, but it's definitely, a believable possibility to think that the MS-13 might have been hired guns in all of this. But there are other possibilities too. We just have to wait. As hard as it is to be patient on this stuff, we have to wait for the news to come out. We have somebody to have the courage to stick their neck out, right? As we were talking about that earlier. Sometimes you have to stick your neck out for the greater good. But
I think some of the drama, it has a little bit to do with, we were talking about this a little bit the other day, that some of the drama seems to come out of the fact that a lot of conservatives, and I don't like the labels liberal and conservative or left and right even, but it's just, I almost am forced to use it to communicate this idea that people who are, have their heads down, they're raising families, they're working hard, don't have a whole lot of time to go out and protest and make a lot of noise. And people who, have an agenda, even if there are seemingly fewer of them, just take the initiative and spend more time out making noise and creating drama because they have the time and they're not, and I'm sorry for the broad generalization there, but there is some truth in that.
Well, but you can take that and make it specific. Yesterday, Candace Owens sat down for an interview with Stefan Molyneux and detailed more of what had taken place when she went to the restaurant for brunch a week ago, and was seated across from 4 Antifa members who immediately recognized her and the other gentleman that she was with. I can't remember his name. But then obviously those Antifa members got on the phone and called their buddies, and within 20 minutes there was a swarm of 25 Antifa people banging against the windows of the restaurant, causing such a ruckus that Candace and the gentleman she was with had to get up to leave. As they were leaving, the Antifa members were screaming at them, spitting at them, using bullhorns in their ears. And Candace's take on all of this was, there's no way on the world that normal working people could call other normal working people, and within 20 minutes there would be this swarm of minions called to action. These are people that are either they're paid to be on the ready, they are organized to be on the ready, they have nothing better to do, they don't take showers, they don't do anything, all they do is wait for an event like this to happen, and then they can spring into action.
I think we should take a minute. Another conversation that we were having earlier today, just amongst ourselves, is we need to put more energy into telling the story about the neocons, because it's not just the left. We were infiltrated by the people that we call neocons, and that would include Bush, Cheney, and all that kind of stuff, but also, what's his name? That Bill Kristol. I mean, that whole crew, they're all coming from Trotskyite early maneuverings. That happened, I think it was in the Bronx, where some early intellectuals were kind of gathered together, and they just started like their own little think tank, it's very grassroots sort of thing, but eventually that evolved into what is now the neocons. But they were, in the early days, they were influenced by the writings or the presence of Trotsky, and so they actually were extreme leftists, and they were disillusioned by the failures, in practice of trying to apply communism in practice, and so they basically decided to make capitalism fail. That's essentially their goal. They want to do everything in their power to make capitalism do everything wrong, so that capitalism would fail. That's who the neocons are. They're basically trying to take whatever is bad about capitalism and make the world worse, so that people are forced into communism. That's their basic MO.
Yeah, basically use the Cloward and Piven strategy, which we associate with the left. That's the neocons are the Cloward Piven of the right, or and it's really a faux right. It's not right. My favorite go-to article to understand what Brainstorm just explained there about the history of the neocons and tying it to Trotsky is an article that I'm sure is still up there, but on LouRockwell.com. He's got it all, and you can find a lot of places up the internet. You can search for that. And the first thing that I think of when I think of neocons, and try to brainstorm, let me know what you think about this, is there's a BBC series called The Power of Nightmares, and it has to do with this whole, what I consider the neo of, instead of winning votes by promising for people, they would promise them to protect you from the boogeyman, and they would trump up. They figure out a way to manifest the boogeyman.
Yeah, that's just old school gangster. It's like you got to pay your protection money. That's
exactly
that's how the gangsters did it. But then you look at the Bushes and stuff. Where did they get their money? The Bush family got their money by smuggling Nazis down to Argentina.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of times the philosophy is carried down through the family lines. In Bill Kristol's case, his worldview came to him through his father, Irving Kristol, and Bill Kristol wouldn't have even had a platform on National Review if it hadn't been for his father. And if you take a look at what George Soros has done raising his kids, his boys are just as bad as he is. So the next generation of black hat, deep state leftist operatives are already in motion.
Yeah, that's something that the foot soldiers on either side are not going to like very much. They don't want to find out, but both the Antifa crowd and these neo-Nazi crowds, both sides are funded by Soros because they're trying to generate this extremism, trying to undermine the stability of our republic, and they're trying to push everybody to these extreme positions. But essentially, they're the same thing if you look at it from the point of view of, well, either side is a version of collectivism. It's a tyrannical thing where it's, herd mind or whatever, and they're both sides. It's like both sides against the middle. So whether you want to identify with racism or you want to identify with classism, so at least on the surface, the neo-Nazis are going to be they're anti whatever minority or whatever, but or like white nationalism, for example. So but the point is that they make race the issue that tries to split everything up, whereas communism tries to make everything about class. And really, they're both versions of the same thing because they're trying to lump everybody together according to some demographic classification. They're saying you should identify with your class or your race, or now with militant feminism, you have to identify with your gender and use that as a tool, in their words, to overthrow your oppressor. But it's this victim mentality that but they're really just causing the divisions. They don't want us to find a harmony with each other. They don't want us to find a way that we can all get along. They don't want that to happen. They want to destroy everything and assert their own plans.
And that's why a lot of them go back and forth between the two leading political parties in this country. You've got an actor like Paul Wolfowitz, who was both involved in the Carter side of things and then switched over and served Republican politicians and presidents. So it's not, they don't see themselves as being aligned to a political party. They are aligned to a movement. And a lot of them, even if they support Israel, it's because the basis of their beliefs are all in the Socialist Labor Party that's connected, that's a big party in Israel. They're not what you would call capitalists. They are more socialist in nature.
And another big aspect of these guys that run both sides and are creating this division is that they are positioning themselves at the top to pose as the saviors. So they're stirring up both sides so that they can have people positioned to be the arbiters of the peace that they engineer. And of course, that's going to be just another level of enslavement, and it's going to be a mix of the two, but it's already centralized power. So what they require people to buy into is the idea that government has to be about a power struggle, and then we've got these people that arbitrate that struggle, whereas our founders saw it much differently. They didn't see government that way at all.
Well, you see these pictures of the ex-presidents all getting together and laughing amongst themselves. You know, this whole party division is a complete lie, you know, because they're all the same party. They just act like they're on opposite sides of the fence, but really that's just they play their part in order to cause us little people to be divided against each other so that we don't trust each other, and the elites can come in and take over everything.
Yeah, they always, no matter who wins on either side, when you get yourself far enough away, they benefit somehow, whether it's the liberals or the Democrats. The powers behind that are pulling the strings, that dark government, they've got their plants. It's like when they pass laws. If you read every detail in the laws that get passed, yes, it looks like you're getting your way on something, but if you dig deep enough, you're going to see something in there that was a concession that doesn't really fit with what your goals and value were for putting that law in place to begin with. So it's like we're all puppets, and there's some power pulling the strings there in the whole political arena.
Well, we're all victims of their mind games, but the
power game.
Well, once you can figure out what they're doing, once you figure out how the game is played, then you can kind of start detaching yourself from those little
from the divide and conquer.
Well, those cords that they have on, you know, the puppet strings that they pull. You can start cutting the cords, and you say, "Wait a minute, you guys are both the same thing." You're both trying to instigate some kind of agitation. You're trying to get people to hate each other for whatever reason, whether that be race, gender, class, sexual orientation, or the color of your underwear. For some reason, they want us to hate each other, and it doesn't matter why. It doesn't even...
Go ahead. The only way that it changes is if you get then somebody that's completely different, unaligned, willing to take a risk, bold thinker. You take a person like Donald Trump, and he's brought into this by, if you listen to how Dr. Corsi explains how this all unfolded, with the military, high-end military, becoming so disgusted with what was going on in the Obama administration in 2013, they had reached the conclusion that the best path forward was to overthrow the government, to a coup d'etat. But they knew that if they had done that, the resulting chaos would be generations of bad blood, bad everything in the country, that even if they got rid of the toxin that was in the White House, that the after effects would be so dramatic that it would be unimaginable and something that they just could not fathom that they had. And an alternative. The only alternative ended up being Donald Trump. There was nobody else standing on that platform.
Well, and why Trump, though? Because, I mean, he was a real estate mogul. He was a New York player, you know. He grew up in the world that these guys play in, you know. So this is, for him, he's been doing this his whole life, dealing with these people.
Right, and so they needed to find somebody with a strong character, with the right background, with a lot of money, so they didn't have to scrounge for pennies in order to run a campaign. And so Donald Trump was the perfect person. Plus, over the years, for decades, he has been on news shows when he's talked about his desires to actually help in the shaping of the country and getting back to the founding principles and all of that. So he was the perfect choice.
Yeah, he's been talking about that since like the 80s or something like that.
Correct.
Yeah, so, I mean, he's been in this game for a long time.
Well, he has. He has.
I think it's his divine
if you read
mission.
His book, The America We Deserve. If you read his book, The America We Deserve, he has not changed since, over the years. He stayed steady and really resolute in his ideals. And
right, and then if you take his strength, his bold approach, his ability he's developed Kevlar skin. Right. He has the ability to take the shot. He loves to give the shot back. If he's punched, he'll punch back harder. But on the other hand, he can take it. And he doesn't wilt. He doesn't, right. A lot of the other people, they'll take a shot, but then they'll crawl in the corner and curl up. And he will not do that. So they knew they had the guy with the right temperament on top of the right background and the right strategy, forward-looking, and to mobilize him in the way they did and to protect him. And there's been 12 that we know of assassination attempts since he became president. They've all been deflected, and a lot of that is due to the combination of Secret Service there's still some white hats in some of these positions. Secret Service, the Marines, and his private security detail. That's what's kept him safe, and the hand of God on his shoulder.
Exactly. One thing I think Trump has done is he has helped people to realize that the government does not rule over us. The government is for the people, by the people. And Trump's reminding people of that. And I don't think that the people of the United States are going to give the government back to the rulers again. I hope not.
Right.
I'm looking at that executive order that he had, where anybody who's doing basically crimes against humanity, we take all their funds away from them. So potentially lots of money could be coming our way. I don't know exactly where that money gets spent, but I don't know if it's to help us make a transition in our economy to a gold standard or what. But, that in itself, just taking money from the bad guys.
That would be great. That would be great if he did do that. And I say that they start with George Soros.
I've got a theory that
I really would like.
I've got to put this.
You're cutting out a little bit.
That idea that let's see if you can pick me up here.
Okay.
The idea that Trump is actually funded or supported by a faction of the New World Order is out there. So I don't want to give people the false impression that all of us are, at least me. I entertain the possibility that there's a split within the globalist controllers between factions that actually want to return to some kind of a decency of government and factions that want to clamp down and become more tyrannical. And there are certain people that believe that because Donald Trump has in the past taken out such big loans in order to finance his businesses, that they basically had to provide him with funds or else the bank would go under. So there are powerful forces.
Well, yeah, they got all those times that during centuries past, these bad guys have, usurped, legitimate royal families and kind of replaced them. In the dark Europe, the dark, what do they call it, the black nobility of Europe. So some of these potentially white hat people that are on our side are major old families with tons and tons of influence and all that.
That's basically what I'm saying, is that some of these people that we would normally write off as being bad guys, and I'm talking even about some people associated with the Rothschilds or whoever, that nothing was 100%. And whenever we don't understand anything in detail, we tend to, think of it in blanket terms. So, like any family dynasty throughout history has always been all bad guys. Well, that's just not true. And you really can't transition the world from a messed up place to a equitable place without having some of the people that hold the reins of power actually want to make a change for the better. So I think a lot of that is happening, and some of these people are actually behind Donald Trump.
Right, and when Donald Trump has gone bankrupt in the past, it was Rothschild-associated banks that bailed him out. And so that creates the impression of him being controlled by them. I don't get that feel just by the actions he's taken and the path that he's chosen and what he is doing. And actions speak not only louder than words, in my opinion, but also when you get to the point where you don't have to worry about saving your business because it's gone bankrupt, and now you're in a position where you're stable and you don't have to run to people that you prefer not to do business with in order to stay solvent, then you cut your ties and you do what you think is right. And I think that's what he's doing.
Well, it's also entirely possible that Donald Trump was guilty of some bad stuff in his past, but maybe he had a change of heart along the way. Maybe he was working with some bad people, and that's why he knows them so well. And for whatever reason, maybe he's willing to take the hit now to make amends. You know, maybe that's the scenario. But all this is speculation at this point. I mean, we just have to wait for the story. That's what's so hard about it, is to wait for, you know, the real backstory to come to light.
And I guess the other thing when it comes to bank associations, all things child. So what bank could you choose that could bail you out that wouldn't be connected to the Black Hat somehow or some way?
Right. So let's go ahead and look at the Cohen story. Let's see what that's about. Getting into our main... I guess we've only had 2 shows at this point, so we don't have an established ritual per se. But anyway, this is our main thing. We're going to try to cover the headlines of what this Spider website generates for us. It's artificial intelligence that tracks the major news sources and combines them in such a way that they are thematized by group. And so let's get into this first one. The one that all the people are talking about is the Trump lawyer, Michael Cohen, and his story about a plea deal. So got the Guardian, because you know that they're super reliable. Right. Okay.
Sorry.
So, according to the Guardian, as we read a couple paragraphs here, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, on Tuesday said Trump directed him to make payments that violated campaign finance laws in an effort to keep quiet 2 women who alleged sexual affairs with the billionaire. The president has denied any knowledge of the payments at a time when they were made. His role in the payments could draw him personally into legal jeopardy, legal analysts said. And, of course, this is the Guardian speaking, so...
of course.
The disclosure was made as Cohen pleaded guilty to bank fraud, tax fraud, and the campaign finance violations in federal court in New York. And so this is a good chance when we're reading, you know, out of the mouthpiece of the enemy right here, the Guardian. It doesn't get much... I mean, this is almost directly from the royal family themselves. But, so... what is it they want to see here?
Part of the plea deal that was struck, whether Cohen volunteered this or whether this was what he's forced to do in order for them to give him something he would accept as a guilty plea, he said, and I quote, "I participated in the conduct for the purposes of influencing the election. That conduct was the hush money to 2 ladies, and Trump did not apparently want that to come out during the campaign." So Cohen was willing to put this out as what took place in order to get the plea deal.
Yeah, and so that's the point where, you know, speaking politically, it might be damaging on the campaign for people to find out that he had sex with a prostitute or whatever she is. Not even a prostitute. She was just a stripper or something, right?
Oh, Stormy?
Stormy, yeah.
Stormy, yeah.
So
I don't even know if you could call her that. She was,
I mean, it's the thing that he did is not even illegal, you know.
Right.
And
it sounds inappropriate, but compare it. If you were able to have a microphone to Hillary Clinton's mouth during the campaign. Can you imagine what she was telling people to say and not to say from all of her husband's dalliances back in the 70s to present and everything she's done?
What about her own dalliances?
If they were to hold her to the same standard.
Exactly.
If they were to hold Hillary to the same standard they just held Cohen, that she'd be on death row.
I want to know about Hillary and Huma. What's really happening there?
I don't. Thank you.
A little too tight.
That will scar me.
But okay. Yeah, I mean, and this is our own, as readers, as potential citizen journalists, when we're reading these sources, we have to be skeptical about what their motivations are. What is it they're trying to do to us? The way that they word things and all that stuff. So they've got this, there's a situation where the President of the United States has a lawyer that is pleading guilty. And because his lawyer is guilty of something, then, well, that must mean that Trump is guilty of something, right? So
no, not necessarily.
And so,
any opportunity to pair his name.
Yep.
Yeah, they're just looking for something to make it look like he's guilty.
Right. And so it may be the case that Donald Trump did something that is improper in terms of, typical moral standards, especially of his conservative base, people that would not approve of that behavior. And so he paid her to shut up about it. And that is not illegal.
Hillary Clinton was the leader of the Hush Fund during Bill Clinton's presidency. And she is the one that first intimidated and confronted all of his accusers.
Yeah.
Did other things that haven't been proven, but you would be led to believe that they were potentially illegal, some of the actions were taken against them, and saw that the hush money was paid to them.
And the importance of mentioning...
That was Hillary direct. That wasn't her lawyer.
Right.
That's what Hillary was doing.
And so the reason that mentioning that is significant in this case is because most of us think that what justice is that we're all playing fair, which means that whatever standards apply to one side should apply also to the other side. But even if you don't even consider, what Hillary might have been guilty of, everything that Trump did with this lawyer, with the Cohen, none of that's illegal. And so none of it could be used to impeach him. None of it could be used. I mean, it makes him look bad from a certain moral perspective, but it's not illegal. It can't be used as grounds for...
Even if it makes him look bad from a moral perspective, we as voters knew what we were getting. I mean, through the years, Trump has never had a sterling reputation. We knew what we were getting, but we also had enough faith in him to at least come through on his promises. What we were faced with was someone that they say they're going to do something, but they never do it. And that's that was kind of the thing that we were up against.
And when you hear Dr. Corsi talk about Donald Trump, who is known for many years, he says that Donald Trump, when you see him in public and when you see him in private, he's the same guy. He is not a chameleon.
Right.
If you ever saw that bit of footage from the Ron Brown funeral when Bill Clinton was walking away from the funeral, laughing and having a great time with one of his buddies, pivots, sees a camera, and immediately starts to cry. That is not Donald Trump.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, so it just kind of makes anything that Cohen does, it makes it irrelevant if you look at the broader picture there, it's, so, I agree with Dr. Corsi when he said that probably wasn't the smartest move that Donald Trump made in hiring him.
So we're thinking strategically here. Let's think in terms of we're playing a game of chess,
right?
And what we're doing is we're playing for, and the stakes are basically what's going on here. We're playing for public opinion. That's the only thing that really matters in most of this stuff is just what do people think, and so the way that these articles are written, the way that they're trying to program our minds is to gloss
spinning it.
Well, they're glossing over a lot of distinctions that shouldn't be glossed over. Whatever Cohen's doing does not say anything bad about President Trump. That's
and equal justice under the law. What you're talking about. You go back to the 2012 campaign when it was Obama versus Romney, and Obama leans over and he thought it was a dead mic, but it was a live mic, and whispers, or not whispers, said it outright to the foreign minister of Russia.
Oh, yeah.
Just wait until the election is over, and then we can do whatever we want. Now, that is collusion.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you in that same election, you had Romney come out and say, I can't remember what he said, but it was very minor in comparison, and yet the press vilified him for it. You know, this double standard has just gotten so out of control and frustrating for us, and then they wonder why.
Did you see that story about the pregnant woman? I think it was California, and they said her husband was arrested, illegal immigrant, he was arrested on the way to the hospital, and they made, I saw many news lines making the story, making a big deal and making you get all mad at Trump and his organization for coming down hard on illegal immigrants. Well, when you dig deeper into the story, you find out that she was not in labor, she was not on the way to the hospital. It was a scheduled C-section. It wasn't this big emergency, yank the man out of the car while she's in labor story. And he was wanted for murder in Mexico. Yeah. And an illegal immigrant on top of it all. And so that's just, it's exactly what you're talking about, the manipulation of public opinion, the looking for stories and spinning them and associating Trump's name with it. And it's all about the elections. It's all about the power.
They immediately jump to the wrong conclusions, and they don't want to find out the truth. They want to jump on the narrative while it's hot.
Right.
Yeah, and they don't want you to find out.
Right.
Right, and the top of everything you said, which is correct, that he had a murder warrant from Mexico. They had also been trailing him for a period of time, and just were waiting for the right opportunity when he wouldn't pose a danger to his family or others, when they could surround and arrest him, and that's what they did.
So I'm going to take a chance here to jump in and remind the panel that what's going on here. We're discussing, the content of our, what we're covering here is we're covering the political stuff mostly, and it has to do with like the things that we would normally associate with politics. But our own personal mission here with Corsi Nation is to empower the citizen journalists. And our enemy is not actually the left, or as you would say that, our enemy is the mainstream media. And
exactly.
So in looking at the way that these bigger companies are describing these things, we need to analyze them in ways so that our listeners can understand for themselves how to start putting filters on what the media is covering. You
don't take anything at face value, first of all, and if it's got some kind of a sympathetic hook or a tearing down of the president right now, then stand back.
Yeah.
Look it up and do your research with multiple sources. The alternative media is now more reliable than mainstream media. Find people that seem to be knowledgeable and that you trust. People like Greg Hunter, Dr. Janda, and others that do fact reporting, and don't have 2 or 3 that you go to, but have a network, True Pundit, and others that do real reporting, and use those as your information sources. Do not, in my opinion, never go directly to the mainstream media. Get it from the locals media and get more than one opinion.
But, get the local people reporting.
Well, I highlighted here in the video, you should be able to see this in the YouTube video, that this article really reveals the kind of techniques that the media is using. And while it's good to kind of get clued in about what's really happening, you listen to these other sources and stuff. But ultimately, I want you to think for yourself. I want you to you become the expert. You be the one that you trust. Trust your own judgment. But that means that you have to start cultivating your judgment. You have to learn to think for yourself, because nobody's ever taught you that. You may think you have the ability to think for yourself, but nobody in your school has taught you how to do that. Nobody has taught you how to pray
about it.
Have your reflections.
For the religious, yeah.
But look at this. Look at this paragraph here. The plea bargain could increase legal risks for president, as it raises the possibility that Cohen will provide information to U.S. Blah blah blah. The point is, they use it could increase. The plea bargain could. Okay, Sure, it's possible, and it also raises the possibility. See, they're not saying definitively that this is going to do anything with the Mueller investigation. They're saying it raises the possibility,
which is yellow journalism.
So right, I mean, they're saying something true, but those words are so subtle. And yeah, it's like
twist it.
Well, lots of things are possible.
But that's the way they work.
How does paying off a couple ladies that were attracted to a multi-billionaire who was running around and having a good time, paying them off, and then later asking his attorney not to bring it up during the election because the attorney was helping him with get elected? How in the world does that lead back to Russia?
Yeah. Or anything that's impeachable. Any impeachable offense whatsoever.
Crimes and
that brings up the thought of using, critical thinking skills, in disseminating the news. I've worked with some of these people. They don't care. They don't care if they tell you the truth. They just have to tell enough of the truth so they don't have to so they won't get in trouble. That's the thing that everybody has to keep in mind, is that's all they have to do, is tell enough of the truth so they don't get in trouble, so there's no libel.
Another key trick here is, though, you look on you zoom down through that whole article, and usually people read the headline and maybe just the first couple paragraphs, and I do that myself. I'm guilty of that. But somewhere in the last couple of paragraphs, usually there's some bad piece of information they don't really want you to know about, but they have to say it in order to be complete. That's where those stories, I mean, those kind of points that they're trying to bury, they bury it down at the bottom because most people don't have the patience to look through the whole thing. So maybe start with the last few paragraphs. What is it they're trying to keep from us? Let's read through here.
And that's exactly right. That is hitting the nail on the head.
I think
the bottom line with all of this, the standard is crimes and misdemeanors. If you're going to head towards impeachment, that's the requirement. The House has to hold a trial to find that, and then it goes to the Senate, and that's how the process works. Bill Clinton was found guilty of multiple counts of crimes and misdemeanors by the House, but the Senate would not remove him from office, so he was impeached but remained in power.
Right.
I think one point about critical thinking that we can say all we want about school education, and I think that's all very valid. But even though I did go to elementary school and high school in a time when maybe education had just a little bit higher standards than it does now, one thing that was really very significant in my life was my father at the dinner table. First of all, we sat down together for dinner. And my dad would ask me and my brothers questions, not in a domineering or threatening way, just like to make conversation. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Why? And it challenged me in a way that really helped me develop as a person and as a thinker. I think that that kind of thing really begins in the home.
Oh, absolutely. I want to be very, 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 very clear that I'm not condemning education as such. I'm condemning the people who end up making policy decisions in terms of the curriculum designs, what do they call it? I can't remember the name of the current.
Common Core.
Common Core, right? So people like Bill Gates that get into those sort of boards of education and stuff. Why is Bill Gates so influential with that stuff? But anyway, the idea of learning to think for yourself. I mean, once upon a time, basically before the 20th century, I mean, everybody who was educated studied philosophy. And it wasn't until the turn of the century that became a specialized discipline unto itself. And everybody who considered themselves educated considered the great thinkers of history. Western culture is what, they're looking at. But, everybody should be reading their Plato and Aristotle. Everybody should be reading a little David Hume and John Locke. And this goes into the foundations of our Constitution and the good parts of Western culture that we're, this is an opportunity to have a conversation in your own head, of course, but you're having a conversation with the greatest minds of history. Let's find out what they think, and they teach you by you watching and following their argumentation, why they get from one point to the next, it teaches you how to think. And
you're going to find some of that not in the classroom, but online if you connect with the right people. And if you connect with people like Dr. Jordan B. Peterson or Dr. Gad Sad, you are going to hear just what you're talking about. You're going to hear people that tell you that you need to learn how to think for yourself, make your own decisions. Dr. Peterson is outstanding in how he helps the young folks understand that education is their responsibility, and if they allow themselves to be indoctrinated, instead of fleshing out for themselves what's really going on in the world and what history is all about, then they are doomed to be just pawns in this giant system that's collapsing.
Oh yeah.
Well, parents don't know what's in the curriculum.
Right.
They don't know what those textbooks look like. They don't know what the teachers are saying in the classroom behind that closed door with those 25 or 30 students all in the, little children being influenced from preschool on up. That's where the indoctrination begins.
Yeah, and every generation gets a little dumber.
And then the families, how many families actually sit together and have dinner anymore? I like what Abigail said, that a great deal of their learning time was at the dinner table with the family. Well, the way families operate today, for one thing, we don't have the multi-generational families like we used to have. People are running off after careers. They're separated from the grandparents and the aunts, and a lot of them, and we don't have that family support or that education in the home. They're running off to sports events. They're running off to little league this or we've gotten so busy. Yeah, we've gotten so busy with our activities. And
but we don't have a Wayback Machine. We can't go back to teleport back to the 1950s.
But we got to protect our babies now.
Yeah, and people can prioritize.
We've got an opportunity, and it's through things like CorsiNation.com and Secret Squirrels and other avenues. This is the medium where the children are growing up to be educated now. They are not completely lost to the teachers. They are also open-minded to alternative learning themselves, as long as people like Brainstorm and Dr. Corsi and others assemble learning platforms that attract them and then give them the opportunity to learn, but at the same time to have the skills to be able to learn for themselves throughout their lives.
Yeah.
And so this kind of a platform is what makes that alternative to indoctrination in the classroom possible.
Yeah, and so like I used to play tutor to a lot of incoming freshmen at the college level, and I was exposed to a lot of people that just wanted to sit back and have somebody tell them what to believe, because that's like the one turning point when you get from the high school level thinking to college level thinking, is that people are not, it's not the teacher's job anymore to tell you what to think. We're going to teach you how to think for yourself, right? When you're in high school, and I don't even think it should be this way in high school level or even primary, secondary. We should have the ability to ask questions and stuff like that, but they basically telling you, sit down, shut up, and listen to what I'm telling you. And part of that's just because of the sheer number of students in their classroom. But, once you get to college, education is now your job. It's not the teacher's job, it's your job. And you have to learn how to ask your own questions and find your own answers. That's the big pivot that you have to make when you go to college. So you have to learn the techniques that people in the past have learned. Learn how, basically, you take the writings of the people who are leading everybody else. I mean, the most influential people are influential for a reason, because they know how to think. For like one of the most important thinkers in Western history is Newton, and the reason Newton was such a powerful thinker and the reason why he had such great insights is because he employed a dual criteria of truth. It's all fancy phrases that we're going to talk about here, but the dual criteria of truth. So on the one hand, you want to make sure that the idea or some kind of given proposition. So we're going to say the cat is on the mat. So you can use your eyes, your sensory organisms. You verify, is there a cat on a mat? Yes or no? And then we have some kind of truth value Is it's yes or no. True, the cat is on the mat. Maybe the cat's laying half on the mat, half off the mat. So simple binary logic isn't always going to work. But you get the point, right? It's like that's what empiricism is about. It's about taking this given proposition, and that proposition should match up one-to-one correspondence to a state of affairs in the world. So, cat is on the mat. Yes, there is a cat on the mat. Okay, simple enough. And rationalism is the different criteria of truth, where you have some proposition that says, like the classic logic example is Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. This is deductive reasoning. So somebody like Newton is somebody like Newton because he's using both of those methodologies. He's using both the rational idea that there's a logic that has to be answered to, but there's also a state of affairs in the world that has to be answered to. If you use both of those, you are going to be a powerful thinker indeed. Learn that.
I think the way that you get young minds to be thirsty for that kind of knowledge is to do things like what Dr. Peterson is doing when he creates his platform of the maps of meaning. He goes through how you determine your own beliefs and how to do it in a way that's right for you. His 12 rules for life, his antidote for chaos, where he teaches folks, and it could be any age. I mean, even at my age, I've learned a lot from Dr. Peterson. But I think when you promote platforms like this, what he's doing online through his own website and YouTube, what Dr. Corsi is doing through CorsiNation.com, Secret Squirrels and other platforms where it's just kicking around ideas, different viewpoints, and so on, and not always coming at it from the exact same perspective. I think that's how you create a thirst for knowledge, and that's what we have to instill in the youth of today. Otherwise, they're just going to be lost in the left-wing machine.
One of the things that I want to point out here, and Brainstorm mentioned it as one of those dual decision points.
Having a real hard time hearing you. You're. I'm not making it out. Anybody?
No, he's a robot. He's a robot. Not a Russian one, though.
A robot with a dead battery?
Bad bandwidth.
Yeah, a robot that's trying to use the auxiliary Wi-Fi.
That's kind of funny.
So, Brain, can you go to the cat videos now? I think we're ready.
He's really thinking about what he's saying.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I want to hear what he's saying, but I can't make it out.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
Type it in chat, maybe?
Yeah, that's a good... Somebody can read it to me.
I could go ask him.
Yeah, Arrow, you're cutting out so bad that unfortunately it's just not possible for us to understand what you're thinking. So, Brain, back to you.
All right, we're going to go to the next story. I think it's time to move on. We got this Russian hacker thing. I have not followed this story. Does anybody else have any insights over what this story is about? Voice of America.
Oh, let's see.
So let's just read this one here.
Microsoft's just claiming that the Russians hacked them.
Does anybody...
Can you guys hear me better?
If
yes.
you go into the...
Is that coming through?
Yes.
Welcome back.
The thought that I was trying to get back to was when Brainstorm mentioned what's going on in the world as one of the dual points of Newton's philosophy, or ways of thinking, or maybe it wasn't Newton, but anyway, the idea is that it's commonly assumed that people that have the correct view of history, in other words, what has happened before, and of course we tend to see what's happening in the world in terms of the context of the history as it's been given to us. But if you investigate that at all, what you find out is that history is written by the winners, and the winners we're often liars and cheats, and the history is often untrue. So I would say that in order to learn how to actually analyze current events correctly, you need to do some serious investigation into real history.
Yeah, and there's philosophy of history is a subject in its own right. One of the reasons why I chose to study philosophy is it's a license to drive in every place, because there's a philosophy of mathematics, there's a philosophy of language, there's a philosophy of everything. And so if you study philosophy as a major, you can go anywhere. One thing you have to anticipate, though, ahead of time is that the main people that are going to be angry with you are the people who are education majors, because it's their job to pass on the collective wisdom of mankind to the next generation. And if you're constantly going through and questioning every little point that they're making, they're going to be very angry with you, just to have a heads up. So, but yeah, I totally lost my train of thought. I'm getting old. Sorry.
Well, I think the point of this new story about Russian hackers is supposedly that there's a connection between these think tanks and other operations that sought to launch cyber attacks against political groups here. And obviously, they're inferring that was during the 2016 presidential election cycle. But I don't see in this anything new that actually brings out something that hasn't been known. The fact that the Russians have been dabbling in our elections goes back to almost any election since the communists took over that country, and we have reciprocated this country by putting our little finger in almost every election around the planet since the CIA was created. So isn't there a goose and gander thing going on here?
Well, some of that's just geopolitics. I mean, that's just how the game is played. Every state does that to some degree or other, and that's just not even just state actors, but also even corporations. They have, if the corporation is big enough, they probably are trying to do some espionage.
But that's why we have a free press, isn't it? So that they can't get away with it.
Yeah. So this is the thing, though. About
then that's been hijacked,
Well, I have up on the screen here Vault 7 of WikiLeaks, and this is one of those things that we were told that CIA has the ability to make themselves appear to be anybody. So it could have been the CIA that was involved in the hacking. We don't know, because CIA has the technology to make themselves look like anybody. And actually, after this release, anybody can look like anybody, because now
and some of the thinking is that the CIA purposely allowed these tools to be spread so that they could create an environment in which they could control and even manipulate some of the hacking so that it would appear that others are doing it, when really, however the hacking is taking place, all the information through Five Eyes and Seven Eyes and all these greater intelligence networks funnels back to them anyway. So when you think about it, the CIA was vested in enabling everybody to become a hacker, because then they could suck up all the data that all those people, all those hackers were creating.
Very nefarious.
Well, see, but this is so there's business as usual on the geopolitical level, and then there's the intelligence community and their ideas about standard practice. And so things that may appear to average citizens like us, it seems like, I can't believe this is happening. It's like, this has been going on forever. This is a normal thing. This is nothing. And so when you get some corporation like Microsoft saying, they got evidence that Russia hacked this or that, so I don't know that you didn't do it yourself. Microsoft is a huge player in this too. They might have created that evidence from nothing themselves.
Oh, all you have to do is go on the Norse map and watch where all the attacks come from, and a good deal of them come from Microsoft's own little servers. Just watch it for an hour.
This is just a variation of a theme based on what the antivirus companies were doing and probably are still doing to this day, like McAfee. McAfee was purposely releasing viruses just before financial officers needed to close their books, either at the end of a quarter or the end of a accounting cycle, and then would immediately come up with the solution to how to fight those viruses.
And that's the same thing the deep state does in other ways. It's like the Watts riots in L.A. Let's cause a problem so that we can come along and fix it. And
take away rights in the process.
Right. It's all very disgusting, and it's business as usual. So nothing to see here. And I'm kind of tired.
And whether it's for political gain or the profit motive is in play, with McAfee, I think it was Stepaska, one of the key Russians in all of this nefarious goings on today, was one of the leaders of the McAfee organization that was responsible for releasing the viruses and then extorting, I would use that word, from the corporations to pay them money to cure what they had created.
So let's move on from this story. I'm kind of tired of it. I mean, it's depressing and all that stuff, and we just have to hope that President Trump can do something about it. It's so much farther beyond me. I don't have the ability to do anything about it, so why worry about it? Anyway, moving on to
this. Well, it does affect us, but you're right. There's nothing we can do.
It's it's the serenity prayer. If it's beyond your control, then let it go. If it's in your control, do something about it. If it's out of your control, let it go.
And I think that most of us are doing what we can do. I mean, it's like trying to move a ball, like a football game. We're just trying to move the ball down the field.
And so what is in our power is to take on the mainstream media, because we have the capacity to be citizen journalists. So that's what our responsibility is. Do something about it. It is within our control, so do it. We can't take on the deep state in any other way. It's the only way that we can even be in this fight. So this is what we have to do.
This is John Adams. I kind of disagree with that, Brain. Any of us could be in there in this fight against the deep state using prayer. It's spiritual work. This is how we can, fight them at that game. And, let the spiritual work help and assist us in doing that battle. Even though we can't do it directly, we can do it indirectly, and we have a lot of tools we can pull on for that.
How dare you disagree with me? You're not allowed to think your own thoughts. How dare you?
He's the head squirrel. He's the head squirrel, John Adams.
I'll tell you what it means to think for yourself. You can't do it yourself. What are you doing?
Yeah, you won't get any nuts then.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'll go away.
I agree with you, though.
I'm just joking around, obviously.
Well, yeah, we can't just give up. I mean, I can't personally.
I don't see this as giving up.
I know, but I just that fatalistic thing of like, if I it'd be difficult for me to put one foot in front of the other and take my next breath. I mean, we have to hope that something that we and I know you do. But I'm just phrasing that just as a general outlook on life.
No, it's a point taken. I understand. I mean, I guess I take it as a given that, every day we're in a spiritual battle, ourselves on a personal level. That's between you and God. I mean, you and God have to work this out. It's like, what does it take for you to find the right alignment with yourself and with God? And developing that relationship is a personal, ongoing thing. And there's always going to be those bad forces that are trying to interfere with it. That's your normal day, isn't it? I mean, that's my normal day.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but you've also got to think, too, that you've got to do triage on your battles and figure out which ones are more important. And that one right now is kind of a little bit lower on the totem pole for us. We've got to get our country back, and then everything else will fall into place, hopefully.
I mean, I do. This is a daily battle for myself, and I do see a therapist for whatever good that does. I have my own many criticisms of the mental health industry, but I do try to take whatever advantages I can have. But I see this as, and I don't even like to think of it all the time as mental health issues, because I really see it as a spiritual health thing, and some of it is about like how we associate these different concepts. What is spirituality? What is psychology? What is the difference between the two? And There's not a whole lot of difference as far as I can tell. I mean, it's how you think, it's how you live, it's your intuitions. I mean, where does one stop and the other begin? I can't quite figure it out. But anyway, for me personally, it's a daily battle, and you're right. I just take it on that that's what you got to do. Even if there was no deep state, I'd have that.
Well, I think that there seems to be a tendency to think about spirituality on an individualistic basis. We were talking about this the other day, how our society tends to be most individualistic, and I think that applies to spirituality too. So that the spiritual term throughout history has been, sometimes referred to as pietism, where what happens if somebody gets just focused on their individual relationship with God, they may have a very good and very moral life, but they may not be very connected with the rest of humanity, and they may not be influencing culture around them very much at all. And I don't think that's necessarily a healthy spirituality.
Right.
A healthy spirituality should be connected with the world around you and making a difference, and that's why.
Well, that's why I got you guys. You're my fellowship right here. You're my crew.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I want to add to this, though, is that there is a science. Much like people that were trying to discover that, hey, they came back and said, well, you can split an atom and create, all this energy, and literally enough to run a city and its lights for thousands of years if you harness it correctly. Well, 100 years ago, somebody would look at that and they would say, well, that's crazy. You can't do that. But then it took somebody who actually got the impulse that knew how to do it. Spirituality is the same thing. Learning how to defeat these forces, you can actually learn how to do this. And there are laws that are involved. And if you invoke those laws correctly and you're in alignment with the will of God in doing that correction, these major dominoes can fall. And there are slight references to these in scriptures throughout the world, where in the Bible it even talks about if your faith is as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Well, that's not just hearsay. That's actually true. If you understand the laws that are behind it, those things can happen. I mean, that's what Jesus was trying to show us. Greater works shall you do because I go unto my Father. So I have seen miracles occur when 3,000 people get together and they put their attention on a certain subject, and boom, bam, changes are happening.
Doing my best, man.
And that's what we need, So I'm a firm believer that we have victory in our sights. And all we need to do is to raise consciousness and get people to the point where we all know how to do this. Nothing can stop, the will of God from being manifest.
Yeah, I don't think there's, I don't think we've quite grasped to the degree to which the awakening that we're now experiencing in America and around the world is actually a spiritual awakening. I think it's a spiritual awakening disguised as a political awakening. It's kind of like humanity is awaking from its slumber in which we were fed lies, but now the light of the truth of God is shining on our hearts and our minds. And there's been, one of my favorite books that I read recently is called The Fourth Turning by Strauss and Howe, and it makes the case that throughout history there have been awakenings, and then those awakenings a couple generations later are followed by a political change. In the period that we're now in is actually one of those times of political change, but the stage was set by the awakening that happened in America and around the world a couple decades, or actually 3 or 4 decades ago. So yeah, it's a pattern, and it's exciting to live in these times because it's happening.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, it is a spiritual battle ultimately, but the thing is, the way that we normally think about spirituality, I think this battle that's taking place right now, the war that's taking place, is bigger than what is, how do you put it? In other words, this spiritual revolution is bigger than what our notion of spirituality even can comprehend. So it's like our own concept of what spirituality is has to change as part of the spiritual revolution.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with you. Yeah, you can't, as they say, you can't pour new wine into old wineskins. You have to expand the chalice that you're going to pour that new consciousness into, and it's all a matter of knowing what's going on. And like the splitting of the atom, it's all in knowing how to do it. Somebody, Einstein or Fermi or one of these guys had to step forward and say, hey, look, if you look at it this way, this can happen. And we're getting to that. I'm seeing that all over the place. People are waking up to these kind of concepts and go, well, wait a minute, we don't have to put up with it. We, pray a certain way. What if we attend it a certain way? Yeah, absolutely. People realize they're not victims anymore.
It kind of gets into the idea of theodicy. Why does God allow evil in the world? I mean, you can wrestle with that question for a while. I mean, people have spent lifetimes trying to wrestle with that question. But, basically, when we normally think about God as all-knowing, all-good, and all-powerful. Those are the three attributes that when we're thinking, I mean, this is a philosophical take on theology, but that's how they define God. So that, philosophers are notorious. You have to define every term you use. But when you're saying, do you believe in God or not, you have to define the term. And what that means is some all-knowing, all-good, and all-powerful being. That's the three attributes that philosophers have given to God. And so you say yes or no to that, according to that definition. And so whether or not there is a God, from that point of view, it's like, do you believe this entity exists? And there's a whole bunch of really interesting stuff that's been talked about over the years with that. I mean, I'd really like, if you want to get into like the mixture between philosophy and religion, look at Aquinas. He's oh my God, he is so good. He'll make you think. And at some point we need to talk about Aquinas because he is just so spectacular. My favorite metaphysician. But at any rate, we need to get back to the news. Trying to get this out. Let's get this last story covered so we can move on with it. Something about the statues being destroyed. We have people that are trying to claim that our statues are in some way making us, the Western imperialists, the dirty Western imperialists that we are. And they're just trying to destroy our history. They're trying to erase our history so that they can assert a new group identity.
Well, yeah, I think some of that has to do with the fact of core rebellion. And by core rebellion, I'm talking about not wanting to take responsibility for their own actions. So by eliminating past history, then they can just wipe it out and say, I'm not responsible for any of this. And I think that's what we're seeing with Antifa. We're seeing it with, all these groups that are just rebelling. We're seeing it with the pink, hats. We're seeing it with everything else that's going on. This is a core rebellion. It's a core rebellion against their own spirituality and wanting to take responsibility for their own actions. And that, I think, is a core issue of this. If you wipe out the history, then there's nothing that points them back and saying, hey, look, maybe we ought to do things a little differently.
I think an interesting thing that occurs, too, and we were talking earlier about President Trump being, stepping up in this time. Virtually all of us have had periods in our youth where we did things that we're not proud of, that things that would definitely not play well in the media. And when you look back through history, you have some men who, are perceived as both being great and having issues. And I'm mostly thinking of Andrew Jackson, whom I know the president very much identifies with. And he stood against the Federal Reserve banking. It wasn't called that then, the central banks. People tried to shoot him and their guns jammed and weren't able to shoot him. He obviously had angelic protection around him. But at the same time, he had some prejudice against Native Americans. So all of us are this blend of, I don't like to use good and evil, I guess light and dark. And as we look back through history, sure, we can find something in probably virtually everybody's life that we could pick apart. But that doesn't make their contribution any less significant.
And there's a bit about atonement, repentance that we like to talk about. If there's something that our society is guilty of, you can't just get rid of it and have it go away. If repentance is in order, then we need to be reminded of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
See, I firmly believe, I believe in a God that's that's a loving God. So let's take an example. Let's say that you have a group of kids playing out on a sandlot someplace, and somebody hits a foul ball and it breaks a window, next door. So the owner comes out, and so are you going to forgive the kids for breaking the window? Yeah, absolutely. But do they have to pay for the window? Yes, they're going to have to do something to pay for that window. And so all these events and all these circumstances and things that have happened in the earth and have happened in our nation, we have to pay that price. We have to do something as a repentance for it, to say, hey, wait a minute, this wasn't my idea. And even if it was at some level or something, we're asking forgiveness for this so that we can get some intervention. And I don't believe God's any different, than somebody else in those instances.
Yeah, I agree with you, and part of that is repenting for having allowed this robbery to have gone on, because we were asleep. We didn't watch. We weren't vigilant citizens. We had to we let our government get out of control by presuming that we're good people when they weren't.
Yeah, and that some folks don't know how to do anything about it. And I think that's where we really have to help and say, yes, there are things that you can absolutely do about it. And I believe that that's, one of our major missions at Corsi Nation is to show people that there are things that we can do about this.
Right.
So up on screen right now, I've got our Corsi Nation site open, and I got it on the International Day of Repentance. That will be October 13, 2018. So sign up on Corsi Nation, or at least take a peek at it. If one of you guys can drop that into a link into the chat. I think it's also available in the description if I remember right. But at any rate, we're going to start thinking about sneaking off here. So I'm going to start our little music. You may not hear it, but it's there. Got to have faith. The sneaky business is on.
I hear it.
Okay, so this is another day down. Doc Corsi's been on vacation, having a good time. Hi, Doc. How you doing? Say hi to Monica for us. All that stuff. Anybody else want to say hi to Doc?
Have a great time, Doc.
Continue to enjoy your vacay.
Well, he's going to be coming back.
Hi, Doc.
Friday. Friday is when he's coming back. And I want to tell everybody that tomorrow we're going to be starting a little bit late. Maybe half an hour, maybe an hour, but I'll be on as soon as I can. And, we'll try to get that started as soon as I can. But it's going to be a little bit late, maybe. So then we'll have another show on Thursday. And by Friday, we'll have you back in the hands of Doc Corsi. So take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Join up here and be empowered. Bye, everybody. Say bye. Say bye.
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 Bye.